Today we're joined with three incredible women. But first, before I get to introduce them, let me tell you a little bit about our Langups Institute for those of you who might not be as familiar. So the Langups Institute was just started back in January, so about 5 months ago. And our mission is really to unlock and help unlock language technologies and what they can do for your business. So we see there's a big gap between innovative ideas, new technologies, and how to implement and make them work on a day-to-day basis. So through educations, through that empowers teams and leaders, through partnerships where we can help multiply impact, and through solutions that are really truly customized for each different use case, we are helping bridging that gap. And that's what drives us every day. So without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome three accomplished professionals, leaders, innovators who have forged their own unique path in the language industry. And I'm really excited today because we're going to hear some amazing insights and very inspiring stories that I'm sure will stick with you. And in these transition times, I'm sure they're going to be very valuable to everyone here listening to this conversation. So if you're out there blazing your own trail right now, I think you'll walk away with some very good practical wisdom that you can use on your professional career. Olga, Veronique, and Gudrun, welcome, and thank you for participating in our first women panel. Today, let's get started with some with your stories. I'd love to hear about. I love to hear about how people's winding path, how they end up where they are. So, I know you've studied linguistics or language processing and international studies and so on and so forth. But did you have also a completely different career in mind when you get started? How did you end up where you are today? So I'd love to hear a little bit of that. And how about we start with Olga today? Oh, you're on mute, Olga.
I thought I did unmute myself. Sorry. Yeah, so I guess my story is pretty straightforward. I studied languages ever since grammar school. And honestly, I mean, there were two options basically. I went to acting school and I went to school specializing in languages. So it could have gone either way. And it went towards languages. I guess acting, well, was not the right choice at the time, I guess. So I knew that I'd find myself somewhere in linguistics. I knew that most likely I would not teach, just not having the patience. And I knew that one way or another that would be related to languages. So when it was university time, it was pretty natural for me to go into the structural linguistics path. So I guess that was it. And then from there, it just started happening. I did a couple of translation jobs and then found myself building rules for rule-based machine translation systems. And then from there, it just natively progressed into where I am now. So I think it was very kind of predetermined. It was pretty much that's what I'm going to do and that's what I'm doing.
Love at first sight with languages. Thank
Yes.
you. How about you, Veronique?
Well, I was planning to be a diplomat. That was my career. I wanted to be an ambassador. I wanted to solve problems around the world. And I realized that this was not a good fit. So I actually did start in the diplomatic corps and I was working at a French embassy. I'm a French national. I was working in Dublin at the time and I dropped out because the pace was slow. I'm too results driven, I think. I realized it was not a good so I said, okay, what will I do? So, you do little jobs, kind of teaching French, trying to kind of figure out what to do. And localization was really starting to take off at the time. So I was in the right place. And really out of luck, I saw that there was a job ad and I went for it. And I got very lucky because I got a great manager at the time. She literally taught me the ropes. That got me going. And then, yeah, your career evolves. And I did I did engineering, I did testing, production, all that. And then commercial was a path that I liked because I like kind of solving challenges with clients. So that was like, I did that for a while, sales and marketing, and then general management. And it's kind of interesting because I started kind of late 90s. So that was like TMs. And then it was about TMSs, and then it was about MT, and now it's about AI. So it's like every decade had this kind of changing tech, and it's very interesting to see through the career. And I've mostly on the vendor side, but across different sectors. It's been very interesting to see the adoption also of tech with clients, depending on the sectors that you work in.
Wow, yeah, it's definitely an industry that keeps us on our toes. It keeps changing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And Gudrun, I'd love to hear your stories and how you got started.
Well, I started studying AI in 1983 during one of the fiercest AI winters you could possibly find. Nobody really believed in anything, and they wanted most people to study linguistics, which I hated passionately. I found there was absolutely no sense in doing anything with linguistics. Syntax was wrong for me, everything having to do with linguistics was wrong. So basically, I became a PhD student at a department which was doing more or less corpus linguistics and statistical language processing. And that combined with cognitive theory and cognitive science made much more sense for me than the grammar of the surface scenario. Basically, I found that to be the right way. And then at the same time, the PCs came. We're talking 83. I mean, the very first PCs were coming. And all of a sudden, I realized there's a medium that we can use that can actually implement some of the things that we're thinking. So the first thing I implemented together with a few students was actually a lexical database. And then my professor was one of the famous professors of Sweden. He was head of the Swedish Academy. So he was asked to evaluate the huge machine translation effort by the Commission twice. And of course, he didn't feel very comfortable with machine translation. So I was the one doing the work without being mentioned. This is classical in Europe. But I evaluated Eurotra, the famous machine translation project. There was never a machine translation project. It was 200 linguists that were actually doing syntax. Anyway, so basically, in early 90s, I am approached by the Thomson Corporation to actually do a machine translation project for them for 1/10 of the cost that Eurota was being paid. And since I knew all the mistakes you could make, I decided to do it. And that was the birth of Esteem. So in 1995, Esteem was founded around a large €2.5 million, or dollars at the time, project for Thomson Reuters. Well, the founder, together with me, was, of course, an engineer who was a statistical expert. And so basically, he is still our CTO today, Blandos Kranias. And if you want to know, I called a certain person, Jochen Hummel, in 1994. I called Trados and asked them, can I change your segmenters? He said, no. Okay. Well, you know that now he's our CEO. So the world simply continues to be in a great way, and he's, of course, one of the greatest persons to work with ever. And in 2010, when he joined us, we founded Corion, that is a knowledge graph software company. And for that purpose, we hired Michael Wetzel also from Trados, and he is currently now running Corion as a managing director. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Well, thank you. And you know that what I find interesting here, this common thread among the three of you, is that when you got started, you had this sort of vision for the future to this expansion in what you see. And having been in the localization industry for quite some time as well, and similar to you guys, we've seen ups and downs in the industry. We've seen in the early 2000s there was quite a slowdown, and there was the internet bust, and machine translation was going to do it all. And then again, but it took a couple of years. The industry restructured, and there was more jobs than ever for the language industry. And then in 2008, 10, there was a slowdown because of the economies or budgets. And now we find ourselves into yet another massive transformation. And so tell me about maybe a pivotal moment where, or something that really told you it is the right path for you, despite those volatility. And it seems that our industry is always one of the first one to be impacted by those new technologies. So how did you know it was the right thing? And yes, you could be confident in the future. Who would like to get started with that?
Maybe I'll go next because by now, Trada's segmentation and translation memories were managed twice at least. I mean, give or take, I think we all started around the same time. So I would say I knew, again, I started building dictionaries and parsers for rule-based machine translation engines and lexicons and some corpus technologies. And I think scientifically, and I don't know if you ladies would agree with me, I think scientifically things became very interesting roughly 97, 98, right? This is where people started receiving a lot of grants. This is where technology really started evolving. This is where natural language processing really started picking up. So, and localization now, Veronique, to your earlier point, we want to be outcomes driven. So localization seemed like a very, very right place to apply all these emerging and newly recognized technologies to, I don't know how better to say, common, quote unquote, common good, right? So that felt like the right place because you really could apply passion for languages, everything that's new, up and coming, and spoken about, and something that really turns the moves the needle for the global economy and humanity in
And you're
general.
still very excited about the future, being the VP of AI at Smartling?
I very much am. And again, to previous comment, there was, translation memory storing previous content is gonna solve it all. No, it's MT that's gonna solve it all, right? Oh no, it's actually AI that's gonna solve it all. While the solve it all might be a questionable variable, it's definitely very exciting because we live in the language meets technology world. And that's the world that really is the first one to pick up. Quite often is the first one to pick up what's innovative and impacted and being changed. So yes, equally excited.
Awesome. What about you, Veronique?
Well, I think that I look at it from a business perspective always, and I kind of say like, what challenges are we trying to solve? So when the financial crisis hit in 2008, and MT at the time, and then NMT came, well, you could see that some sectors still were spending, some sectors were slowing down. So you kind of tweak your strategy, right? And you kind of adapt to that. What I see today, I think it's bigger. That's, I believe that the disruption is gonna be more significant. But to Olga's point, I don't think it's gonna, tech is gonna solve it all. So I'm always kind of going back to what are the challenges we're trying to solve. And if you look at, who's buying services, right? The clients, they're looking always. It doesn't matter if it's like, 100 years ago. How do you do it better? How do you do it faster? And how do you do it cheaper? What I've seen recently is a lot of pressure on the cheaper, because coming from the boardroom is like, hey, how are you going to apply AI and all this tech and language? It shouldn't be cost so much money. So there's been a lot of push towards like pressure on rates and doing it cheaper, while the code still hasn't been cracked to how to do it really. And I do think that some parts of our services are not going to survive in their current form, let's say. But it doesn't mean that other things are not going to emerge related to, to languages. And what I'm seeing is that actually what fuels AI is data. And if you think about it, localization, translation, you take data in a certain language, you transform it into, you do a transformation. But then if you kind of look at all the AI system from a chatbot, from an assistant, or, this is fueled by data. If data is not correct, you have a problem. If data is biased, and we're women here on this panel, we know like it's super biased, right? Or if, if this data is not actually fixed in order to provide the best possible output, then it doesn't work. So I see a place for us in that, in how we're fueling AI across languages, because the AI is still today in majority in English, right? And it's, it's going to take a long time until it's going to work properly. It's going to take a lot of input, and it's going to learn better and better. But I do think that applies a lot to English. The next wave is going to be all the languages. And just as a little anecdote, because I was preparing for this, and I used a couple of different generative AI systems, and I asked about women leading in AI and related to the language industry. Could you give me a list? And I kid you not, they came up with the names of two people who don't exist. Okay, there was and two ladies who apparently run all of the AI for two very, very big agencies. And I thought, I know a lot of people, but it's funny, I never heard those names in my research, and they do not exist. So that was a little anecdote on that.
Yeah, indeed, a lot more work to be done. Thank you, Veronique. What about you, Gudrun?
Well, I have to say that I'm a big believer in multilingual AI, and that is a scenario where linguists play a huge role. Because frankly, am not in localization and not in translation. I really am a very firm believer in AI, and actually, I see the need for linguists clearly in the scenario of decisive and correct prompts, because people don't know how to issue and write a good prompt, and how to basically, engineers used to do all the programming. Now, natural language is the programming language. And being that means that linguists have the really good handle on language as such. And they will need to do that in multiple languages. So I don't see an end of linguists working in language. I see a big boost. And then apart from that, we talk about artificial intelligence. There is no intelligence. This is a machine learning scenario. That means it's an advanced copy and paste. And that is actually all there is. But it's useful because copy and paste, we do that all the time when we talk. We do it ourselves. We have collocations. We start with a word and we know how it ends, the phrase. And then basically we need one thing that is really essential, and that is knowledge. And normally we have been talking about terminology because in translation that is important, translating one word into another word. But here we're talking about knowledge. And knowledge is a different scenario. It's an abstract representation of the world so that AI can deduct the right application. So if I say, for example, temperature as a concept, that can link to so many cases. But if I put human, and that is an attribute of a human, then all of a sudden we know that we're talking about the range of a temperature of a human. So in the health scenario, this is a conceptual representation, and it better be done by a person that knows what he or she is doing, because if we don't do that correctly in all the languages that we needed, we don't have an application in health.
Yes, thank you. This is, this is comforting to hear you talk, because you've been in the industry for so long and you've seen the transformation from first, sending a zip file or to an FTP site to the TMS being the democratizing factor in how many organizations have expanded their team and their work, and now through machine learning and NLP, machine translation, and now with AI. So this is fascinating, and I hope this is inspiring for those of us listening here, because it can be a little bit uncertain, and there's so much hype about so many different things that it's just fluff, right, for the AI. But yes, the this is what we believe too at the Langups Institute. You know, at the core are humans that are doing are going to be doing a lot more abstract work, and but it's sometimes very difficult for painting that journey. So thank you, I appreciate that. um, you know, we've so you know, throughout your career though, you've come fairly quickly in a position of leadership and influence and innovation because well, first, you're incredible professionals and innovators, but then also I think part of it is, you know, the industry has changed so much. There's always been so many opportunities to lead and really pave a new way. And as being a woman, ever been an obstacle, or have you felt like you had to, you know, oftentimes we'll say like, oh, as a woman, you have to work 2, 3, 5 times more than a man, or has there been any occasion where you felt it was the same way in the language industry, or do you feel like in our industry it's something a little bit different? Who would you like to take this one first?
I'm happy to take it. I think that doesn't matter what industry you're in. That's my experience. I think that, how would I explain that? I think that maybe a couple of decades ago, um, if there was bias, it was a little bit more direct. And, you know, people were, you know, it's not that they were less politically correct, but it was tell you, and it didn't mean anything nasty. It's just it would kind of come out and you would be looked at as a woman and, you know, comments would be made. Now, I don't think comments would be made anymore. But I think that there's still a little bit of couple of things, unfair assumptions. And it's hard to move that away. If you're a woman in tech, there's still this idea that in tech school, it's a majority of males. Same thing if you have a career and a family, how, you know, it's assumed, might not be true, that you're the one who's caring for the kids. You know, I think that's, and you kind of need to reset that. Another thing, maybe a little bit, I've seen that in general management, a little bit more of hyper scrutiny. So let me give you a very simple example. If you need to let somebody go, you may get higher scrutiny than a male, and I've seen that. And even though I think that as females, we tend to you know, go through performance assessment and coaching and helping people, but it's like there's not that same view. So that I've seen in that area. And the last thing, and that's I think that's important though, that it's access. And I mean by that, access to finance. The data unfortunately still supports that. Access to finance in VC and in general, it's still imbalanced. We're progressing. My take is that we need to continue to progress until there is equality. And the only way to do that is to raise awareness and also not to take things too personally. Sometimes it's a matter of just having a discussion and kind of resetting the clock a little bit. And people may not mean badly, but I would really hope that the next generations feel that there's total equality.
Thank you. Gudrun, Olga, would you like to add to this?
I would, yes, because actually I learned very, very early to take advantage of the fact that I was underestimated. This was my strongest point when I sat in boardrooms with lots of bosses in the European Union or wherever. They always sort of underestimated my red nails, my high heels, and my miniskirts. And I never, ever dressed in a non-feminine way. Never, ever happened. I have to tell you that actually last week I attended an AI conference here in Berlin. And there was a lunch arranged for women only. And I was about to leave because I didn't have time to stay for the entire meeting. So I walked past the room and I said, there's 15 minutes left. I take a look inside. Do you know what I saw? I saw 50 fantastic women in upper management, totally thrilled about AI with so much power and so much force. And it was a great feeling. And I said, okay, No point in underestimating Europe when it comes to AI. The women are there.
This is so comforting to hear, Gudrun. Thank you for sharing this little bit of this little anecdote. This is great because I know so many women might feel a little intimidated with technologies, or it's being shown in studies that women will not apply for a job if they don't feel like they have all the qualifications. But I'll go that back there in a minute. Olga, did you want to add something here?
Most definitely, most definitely. I mean, first of all, a little bit of stats, and that's I think the latest stats. 24% of STEM workforce are women, and 24% is not a crazy high number. And then of this 24%, only 12% are in leadership executive roles. So definitely we have ways to go. These are numbers. These are not emotions, not sentiment. So we definitely, yes, raising awareness, Veronique, 100% with you. And Gudrun, 100% with you. The lipsticks and heels do miracles when we when we need them to, no questions. But yes, no, I mean, have I been in situations? I was a super, well, relatively young leader, like my first leadership role at like whatever the age of 26, and it was so damn hard to be taken seriously or even have my presence in the room. A combination of a young and female did not resonate at all. And it was very hard to have my presence in the room be taken seriously. But then, Gudrun, agree with you. There are a couple of tricks that you can actually play to your advantage. But there was a situation where I left the boardroom crying just because I was not heard at all. But I think we should probably let go of this like almost support group mentality of like, we're women in tech, we're a minority. And I think we should just really capitalize on our strengths. We are more empathetic, known fact. I'm not generalizing, right? I mean, we use the adjectives, a lot of analysis, like corpus level analysis on adjectives that we use when we describe situations, adjectives that were applied to ourselves, adjectives the way we even describe ourselves in our CVs. We bring something to the table that is extremely valuable, right? Which is a different perspective and empathetic vision. And I think the world is changing. Definitely see a lot more women in leadership role. Certain things are just nature. I'm sorry to say that. They will never change. But certain things are definitely under our control. I definitely see a lot of positive change. Would not leave the
Yeah.
room, would not consider, and nobody can possibly make me leave the room crying. They may be the one.
We'll have to drag you out.
Thank you for candidly sharing that. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where, it's hard, and and I think in the US, for me, having an accent and being smaller, like that French Canadian stature that's very short, and I've felt it too. You're with a bunch of engineers and you're the only woman in the room, and oof, when you're young, it's hard to make a point. But how would you encourage young women today? Because I think, and to go back to what we were talking about with prompt engineering, for example, we had this slug event in Seattle a couple weeks ago, and Pia from Uber and Rutsuko from Scientific were brought up to the conversation prompt engineering. So they framed the conversation around how prompt engineering is such the perfect use case for translators. And in our industry, most translators are majoritarily women, but because it's called engineering and then it has to do with AI, a lot of women, and maybe a little bit the older generation, don't feel like they have the qualifications to actually do prompt engineering. But when you start breaking it down, it's about what is the thought process to get that output. And when we're translators, we have that innate ability to break it down right away, because you have to come up with a different outcome that has all these layers. So how can you help women, think of themselves as like, give that confidence that our gender does not have, or I mean, there's a small percentage that may have it, but for the majority, we don't have it yet. So, like, what would you say to them?
I would probably remove the word engineer.
Okay, great. Because at the slug, we thought about engineering doesn't work in this in this, but you know, this is also being driven by other industries. So, is there a message we can send to these women, or to better share how they can contribute to that role? Because this is one role where I think they're the best fit for it.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, sorry,
sorry,
go on,
Olga.
Olga.
No, Veronique, sorry.
I was gonna say, I mean, it needs to be demystified because there are so many resources that you can use. My number one advice is upskill, learn. There's so many also free resources that you can use. Start from the beginning, understand how things work, and progress, and then try and use it. And I think it's actually the technology makes it quite easy to use. I mean, we're talking here, you know, Gen AI, right? So there, maybe yes, the term needs to be changed so that it doesn't sound like it's very complicated. But the path really is to embrace it, learn, upskill, and go for it. Because really, what you're doing is that you're using your brain and you're leveraging all these years that you've accumulated in terms of knowledge of how language works, how people function, how subject matter is, you know, is being expressed in different languages.
Maybe I could add to that, Veronique. Actually, it's really funny because I was thinking, how would I describe it? Demystify. There is
Yeah.
glorification and mystification around creating prompts and around engineering, around the whole prompt engineering. And if you haven't opened the prompt, like you wouldn't know what it looks like. You tell the model that Gudrun, yes, does not even reason, and there is very little intelligence. You literally try to get the output, the desired output from the model. And when you look at the prompt, and actually, a lady, unfortunately, she left my team. I mean, for a great reason. But she was raising the toddler, is raising the toddler at the same time she started designing the prompt, like the prompt engineering programs. And she said something that totally resonated with me. Just speak to it like you're speaking to a toddler, trying to explain it in for very basic terms what exactly you're trying to get here. And she was putting together the most fantastic visuals of cartoons that she was used to talk to her toddler, but also same cartoons, same concepts applying. So I think there's a lot of mystification. There is a lot of this dark and mysterious prompt engineering out there that only the chosen can do. True, with a little bit of upskilling, a little bit of learning, and just hands-on. Just open whatever the Perplexity or whatever you have on your phone and just try to get the results, try to play with it, learn a couple of parameters. It's great. It's a great skill, but it's really not as complicated as a lot of people represent it to be.
Yeah, I like that demystification. I will definitely take that away. Thank you. Um, so throughout my career, especially when I was much younger, I had desires to climb the ladder and, you know, really do it and, you know, try to get to the next level and so on. And I felt very impatient at first. And but when you spend your time in the buyer side, not only do you have to impress your boss in through your work and so on and so forth, but you also have that this whole localization piece that you need to move forward. And but so it's a little bit difficult to climb the ladder because localization might not be as visible within an organization as the language industry per se. But one of my mentors, she said to me, you know, you don't need a title, just go and get it. And at first I was very frustrated because I was like, well, I don't have a title. How am I just getting it? And but you know, obviously her words really resonated. And actually, you know, you do it, you unlock the next step by doing it. And would you have other advice for young professionals, like how to move to the next level, how to grow? Because you know, now we also, you know, we have an industry in transformation, but you know, 10 years ago it was just asking your stakeholders, don't use Google Translate, and then you did a back translation in English. It was fairly easy to convince people not to use it. But now the technology looks so good. And how would you have some tips on how to take advantage of this opportunity? Because I see it as huge, but it will take a lot of perseverance and a lot of work to socialize that aspect.
Shall I go?
Yes, yes.
Look, one of the hardest things today is to advise young people, because the question is, what will survive AI? But my gut, I have many teenagers around me, Joachim's children, as well as my siblings and many more. And I always say to everybody, follow your dream, do whatever you want to do, but always use AI. Whatever you do, you always use AI on the side. So you follow the path that you want to follow. And when it comes to language, multilingual AI is a very, very good path forward. And I can't see that people are going to stop learning languages because people like to communicate. And even in the communication scenario, we have currently translation as a one directional communication, whereas we need both understanding and communication to work today, and AI can actually make that happen. And we have recently launched what we call Langops Core, which is exactly a platform for that, for communicating with people rather than just translating. I don't know. I think literally there is what I wouldn't want to study today is law, bookkeeping, and a few other things that I think will be totally automated.
And I think that AI is not going to replace you, but somebody using AI will, right?
Yeah.
That's the reality. And you were saying, Gudrun, what do you like doing? And I was thinking back in my old diplomatic day, I kind of liked it, I thought, but then I'm like, what are you actually good at? Because if you're good at something, I mean, I might like to sing, but God, right? But if you're really, that you have a special power and you're really good at it, then you should hone that skill and go all in and be realistic. To your point, there's some professions, sorry, but there's going to be mass kind of job disruption in some professions. However, if your brain is wired to understand how machines work, how they put things together, and also if your brain is good at understanding how language work, then you have a special power because you come at this intersection. And another point, to the point you were making, Pascale, at the beginning about in an organization, how do you progress? What can you do? I think if you are on the client side and you are running or you're part of a localization team, right? This is changing a lot. There's a lot of pressure there. However, your organization for sure is launching a lot of AI initiatives across, across its different, let's say, divisions and so on and so forth. But then that's usually in English. And if you're working for an international corporation, at some point, these applications, these AI systems will be deployed globally in your organization. So how can you add value and say, hey, my team, we understand language. It's not just a matter of translating that thing, right? It's just like there's a lot of work to do around data. So I think that's also a very interesting path if you are, in that part of the industry, looking at what are the possibilities forward.
Maybe
Yes.
I could add to that, Gudrun. Sorry. There's something, Gudrun, you said that really resonated with me in the beginning of the conversation that, and I think both of you actually said it, that AI is predominantly still, when we look at the foundational models, they are very English centric. I was talking to a doctor in Mexico, and he's like, God, you don't even know, girl, what it returns when I put in a Spanish request and I receive Spanish information compared to what I can get in English. And we were talking about his very niche medical field. So indeed, there are so many gaps in multilingual AI. and even more so in multilingual Gen AI, that there's so much work there to do. There's so many interesting things one can do. One coming from bilingual background or even coming from monolingual background, but understanding how language works and having an understanding of how models work. There is so much to be done there on building training corpora, model output validation, prompt engineering and validation, or we decided it's not engineering, creating prompt and validating prompt. So there are tons of opportunities, and there are so many skills that are sought after. Like, for instance, a person with some background in natural language processing that also can understand how prompts work and can interpret the automated evaluation of model performance. Like a linguist who actually, with some NLP knowledge, is the most precious unicorn you can find these days. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities. And on a personal level, I mentor a few young ladies, very pleased to see them land great corporate jobs. And I always say, just remove all those self-inflicted biases that we put upon ourselves. Nobody even does it. We do it to ourselves. Like, hey, I'm not skilled enough. Hey, I don't have enough knowledge. We do it to ourselves. Don't do it. Just go grab it. Carpe diem. That's it. There's nothing else to it.
Yeah. So, okay, great. Thank you. So two very important points so far this morning: demystifying that technology and really understand how language fit in. And then second, look for the gaps in how you can fill them. And I think for young professional, I think that is so important to understand, like how to fill that gap, because those gaps are getting smaller and smaller, but how that unique perspective is shaping your future is very important. And as a segue to that question, I'd love to hear, because here we have you, Veronique, as a CEO, and you've been a CEO multiple times. Gudrun, you're a founder in the technology and in the language technologies. And Olga, you've been leading technologies within different organizations and solutions. And so, how, as a woman, did your unique perception or unique vision really help shape some of those business problems in your respective field? Who would you like to go first?
I don't know. I'm thinking about might not be as applicable to business processes, but more about, I guess, the way I would engage with the teams that I would be building, or the teams. Mostly I would come and build teams from scratch. And I think that probably that unique thing that I would bring to the table is be more of a nurturing leader and take the people first approach when it applies to building teams, managing teams, and helping teams succeed. I think, and I've heard that feedback and was very pleased to hear that feedback from the teams that I worked with, bringing out, helping people understand where their strengths are and bringing out the best in them, and thus building the top performing teams is probably like through nurturing and through conversations and through understanding where their heart is. I think that's what really helped me and hopefully helped the companies that I worked for.
Thank you. And I actually studies suggest that yes, when we have women in a position of leaderships, inclusion, equity are usually on the rise, and it creates a culture that resonate differently. So the numbers are showing that as well. Gudrun, Veronique, would you like to add to this question?
Sure. And my job is to figure out what's the purpose of an organization, right? And set its strategy. And to do that, I call this the helicopter. So you stay high enough that you have a view of, where you want to go and what you need to do, but you need to land that helicopter and go in the weeds and understand. So my way of running, things is to actually spend time with our tech teams, and also spend time with really various profiles within the companies, with external stakeholders. But within the company, if I can stop there for a minute, is not to just talk to my C-level team. I will go and talk to somebody who maybe joined the company a month ago, who's super junior, I think that back to the inclusivity and what Olga was saying is that I tended to be just valuing experience. You needed to have a certain path, and I don't think like this anymore at all. I think that actually being very open to different perspective, or people were just thinking completely differently, is great. And then maybe a last thing is that I like when things are explained to me like I'm 5, because I find that this is just, and give me use cases and show me stuff. This is how I like to function, because then I can actually package this in a way, when talking to different stakeholders, when you're talking to your board, when you're talking to some of your clients, I find that really great. So that with our tech team, I ask them, and they do that. They put together like, hey, that's what we've done for this client. And you can actually really, in a way, evangelize and back to demystifying, because you explain how you're using tech to solve a very specific problem for very specific output.
Thank you. Gudrun?
Yes, well, I have been running operations for a very, very long time, as you know. 30 years is quite some time. At the very beginning, the cultural aspect was very, very difficult because I went from Sweden to Greece to manage a team of engineers as a woman. They told me I had to be a boss. And I was used to democratic discussions and having deadlines that were understood by everybody. And I had to learn that if you do not get angry every now and again and scold people, things will not work. But that actually was, that was only the beginning, because then things evolved, and that became a company culture in a sense. And there was such a loyalty and such closeness in the team. It was like a family, still is. Actually, my Greek team is, or our Greek team, because I actually retired some years ago, guys, but came back because of AI. So basically, they are absolutely fantastic. And that's because there's a culture there that basically you don't fail. You will work through the night. If there's a deadline to meet, they work like you can't imagine. There is nothing like a Greek team of engineers. They're just fantastic. And but at the beginning, I have to admit that was hard.
Well, there's been so many changes and social changes and so many different generations coming, after us and before us, and the different styles. So I can imagine the challenges, but I think the culture is really what sticks together. And I think from my observation in the language industry, language is a gift that keeps on giving, but it takes time to implement, it takes time to build. So I think along those lines, building that culture is really going to pay off over time. So I can't believe we've already had 15 minutes of conversation. So before we open the floor for a couple questions from the audience, I'd like to, if you could say, if you had one tip or one advice to give young women, young professionals today, what would that be?
Learn, keep learning, be curious.
I
Learn.
second that. I like that. Open mind. Just, and don't think AI is scary. Please, it's not.
D2, all of the above. Yes, I agree.
Ourselves at a point in our life where, oh, changes are great and we adapt and it goes, and sometimes it's just difficult. How do you have how do you manage changes, and how do you manage constantly having to it's not about reinventing, but about reiterating or constant not closing the loop, because we're in constant evolution. And as a leader, I found it very challenging sometimes to bring a mindset of like, yes, you're doing something today, but our industry changes so much. Next year it might be something different. And whether we take away something or add something, it's not, it's, it's the game that we have to play in our industry. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I'll take that. I call this like playing the infinite game, meaning that you don't do something just for a purpose. If you play that infinite game, you're gonna do things right. And then you break it down. So it's tough, right? Because it's step by step by step by step. I find that sometimes if like it's too big of an initiative or a goal, it can get people a little bit deflated if they don't see significant progress. So I'm like, always look forward. What can we do better? And then when you turn back and you look at the progress you've done, there's a great feeling because you see, that you've tackled that initiative, you actually completed it. And then the thing also, and that's related to the tech, is that you got to course correct and not beat yourself up if you've taken a path and it was not the right one. And it's better to realize that very early and say, you know what, that was not the right thing. And especially every single week something comes up. So don't panic. It's been DeepSeek and it's been this and it's been that. Just look at it, see how it can help you. And again, if you really break it down and keep your teams on that path, then they're not playing the finite game. They're playing the infinite game.
I love that. Thank you, Veronique. We have a question from Christina from the audience. How, as a woman balancing leadership roles, family, and everything in between, how do you see AI becoming a practical ally in our daily life, not just workplace, but in managing our personal responsibilities, mental load, and who would like to take on that question?
Maybe if I may try, I mean, first of all, using AI at work just maybe to get the work-life balance out of the way. I used to read and still read super long articles from the likes of Archive or like publications on Hugging Face. God, you can get them summarized. They're like, I mean, you just save 2 hours of your life, and actually summarization works pretty damn good. So that already frees up quite a bit of time for your day to day. But I think there is so much happening now with hyper personalization and ability to get recommendations from all sorts of recommendation engines. There are so many, like for instance, I use AI nutrition and fitness coach. It's fantastic. And again, I would love probably to work with a nutritionist. Do I have the time? Not always. But if you actually have an AI app that can break down your macros and everything else for you, there are so many applications. Again, I think we all said in this discussion, just use AI. Don't necessarily read about AI, just use it. And you will find great application for it pretty much in every area of your life. At least that's my personal experience.
And also to help with the kids with the homework.
Oh, how do you do that with, oh yeah, for math, for example, right? So if you forgot the formula of this or that, you can just ask AI, I guess, right?
You can ask if you're in the natural sciences and they want you to do a piece on Marie Curie. Then you ask AI to do a piece on Marie Curie, and then you dissect it and you use what you find is good.
Thank you. One more question. If for those of you who might be the only women on their team, what would be suggest to help them thrive in that environment? Because they might not have as powerful of a voice. And how do you take ownership and confidence of your voice if you're one woman among many men?
That's a hard one. Well, you know something? In my life, it's almost always been the way that I have been on my own in board meetings, and also my engineers, of course, mostly male, very rarely women. Now we have a bit more diversified with AI. There are more women coming into the tech sector. There's no question. But what I would say is never have a relationship within your office or in your working scenario. That's not rule number one. Rule number two, don't fall in love too hard.
Oh. Olga, Veronique, would you like to add a little something before we wrap this up?
I would say
Yeah,
that.
I think
Yeah.
I mean I'm very good friends with Minette Norman, and I'm sure many of us, most of us know Minette, right? And I studied her books inside out. Minette used to be a colleague of mine back in our corporate careers. So she and I are very friendly. And a lot of things in her book I recognize because like, oh, I know this person. I know what she's writing about. But one thing she says, I mean, she says a few things that are just the fact of the matter. Like, in order for some idea that a female brings to the room in a room full of men, a man needs to repeat that idea a couple of minutes later or immediately. And then that idea might get much more traction. That's just, again, that's statistics. So I think there are a lot of things that just accept that this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to be in the room full of men, and just learn to navigate around it. If I need to say something and somebody else needs to repeat it, yeah, to hell with it. At the end of the day, I want to sell my idea. So I can accept it and deal with it. So that'd be my own experience. Some things are just not going to change. And one thing I had to learn hard, no, Olga, you do not need to golf and learn anything about American sports. No, it's not going to happen. Just live with it, girl.
Awesome. Veronique?
If you're a woman leader, you're probably a little bit more, in sync with that, with not diversity, but kind of giving women their seat at the table. So imagine you're in a room full of men, there's one woman, you're going to be aware of that, and you're going to encourage that person, that woman, to speak, and you're actually gonna listen to it 100%. So I think we play a role if we're in these, in these high level positions, to actually encourage women, and I have the radar up and say, let's push them forward and say, hey, you lean at that table and you make your point. So I've been in situations like this where I would, call out, but not of course in a mean way, but rather say, hey, I remember you mentioned that idea, and kind of encourage that person to make their statement. And then, you know what, they start to gain more. It's not even confidence, I say it's self-belief, and that comes through, and then people actually pay attention.
Wow. Thank you guys so much. It's been so inspiring and so wonderful to hear your journey and to get to know you more. So I hope everyone here on this webinar enjoyed this conversation. I know I did, and I learned quite a bit. And so I think we all play a very important role in carving space for other women, but also, as you said, Olga, really understanding the game and taking advantage of it, and also, you know, uh, when you're the underdog, keep surprising them, and so that's very important. So again, thank you so much for being part of our first women panel at the Langups Institute, for being my first guest to my first ever webcast host duty. So thank you. I really appreciate your time, and I hope I see you soon, guys.
Thank you, Pascal, and thank you all, guys. It was great to be with you. Have
Pleasure.
fun, enjoy life.
Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.